right now?
Yeah, I can hear you fine now. Yeah, Beanstalk did make the front page of the Wall Street Journal today, which is crazy. So, again, wish it was under slightly better circumstances or for a better reason, but nonetheless, it's notable.
True. Yeah, it's a lot more attention on Beanstalk now, so that's good. Now we just see the path forward and how we're gonna turn the sentiment around. So it'd be under much more positive circumstances. All right, y'all. About ready to kick this off. We got 50 people in the audience now. Like, this is good time to kick it off.
Is anyone else going to be coming up here, or is it just us?
It's just us.
Okay, sounds good. Then we are rolling and ready to go whenever you are. Just give us like 5 seconds of clean air and go ahead.
GM, everyone. Thank you for joining us today with another AMA with Publius, the founder of Beanstalk. For those of you who don't know, Beanstalk is a decentralized stablecoin based on credit that just experienced a devastating flash loan attack that drained the protocol of just about all of its assets on Easter Sunday, April 17, 2022. Most projects will be finished after experiencing such a hardship, but the Beanstalk community believes that Bean is worth fighting for. The Beanstalk DAO is currently working for free to get the protocol back up and running. And the path forward, Beanstalk will be launching the Barn Raise, a public 10-day fundraiser to restore Beanstalk. Publius, thank you for speaking with us today at the Bankless DAO.
Yeah, thank you very much for having us, Charis.
Yeah, no problem. No problem at all. So, first off, Publius, I would like to commend you on your leadership and remaining so optimistic after the attack. The Beanstalk community is exemplifying the solidarity that can be achieved in DAOs, and it's really inspiring. So, Publius, are you surprised that so many Beanstalk contributors decided to remain faithful to the protocol even though they can't be remunerated at this time? Able to hear me fine?
We can hear you, yeah.
Publius, if you're speaking, you're on mute. I see you're unmuted now.
Hey, can you hear us now?
Yeah, I can hear you now.
Apologies, our Wi-Fi switched over for some reason. Let me try to just prevent that from happening real quick.
Right.
Okay. Apologies. One of the things that was so mind-boggling was the response from the community in the immediate aftermath of what transpired on Sunday. We particularly were totally, distraught might be an understatement, but we're very not optimistic, right? The protocol itself has not had a lot of venture capital backing or any real traditional VC backing whatsoever. And the idea that there was going to be some sort of bailout seemed highly, highly unlikely. And in short, $76 million is a lot of money to try to replace. And it's not just $77 million. It's 100% of the capital that Beanstalk had, right? So really just a horrible position to be in. And the community made it very clear that in their opinion, and it was a wide variety of different individuals posting in the Discord server and reaching out to us directly saying Beanstalk is worth fighting for effectively, and they're going to keep working on it no matter what, even though they can't get paid anymore. A lot of these people are people that recently quit their jobs, their real jobs, if you will, to come work on Beanstalk or Beanstalk farms. And it was just a resounding between the community and Beanstalk farms and other members of the DAO. It's just like a totally resounding message that Beanstalk still has a future. And people have said many times that you're only as strong as your community, and Beanstalk is demonstrating that in real time in practice. So it's been very inspiring to be a part of, and we are, as a result of the response from the community, optimistic about the future that Beanstalk still has in front of it.
Well, that's very admirable. Definitely big shout outs to the Beanstalk community for holding it down and keeping this thing going. So the attack was on Beanstalk's governance model, not its economic design. So what exactly went wrong here? What made this attack possible?
So in practice, the attacker borrowed $1 billion in a flash loan and used that money to acquire silo whitelisted assets. And they were able to acquire effectively $1 billion worth of silo whitelisted assets, which allowed them to acquire a 2/3 majority of stock, the governance token of the Beanstalk DAO. And that facilitated them to vote and execute via a supermajority a BIP, a Beanstalk improvement proposal that they had proposed 24 hours prior. Now, in practice, what the attacker did was a very sophisticated Trojan horse strategy where they deployed BIP 18 and 19 back to back, and they effectively looked identical, BIPs 18 and 19, with the exception that BIP 18 called an address, an Ethereum address that up to that point did not exist. Whereas BIP 19 called an Ethereum address that had a contract which was registered as on an Etherscan as BIP 18.sol. And so in practice, it looked like BIP 18 and BIP 19 were the same, but the proposer, and again, the contents of BIP 19, which this is substantive, was just to donate 250,000 beans to the Ukraine. The concept was that it seemed like this person that was proposing a relatively innocuous BIP made a mistake with BIP 18 and then attempted to resubmit it properly with BIP 19, if that makes sense. So there was a sophisticated Trojan horse at a social level. It was mounted, as well as an obfuscation at the blockchain level, because then what they did was, at once 24 hours elapsed, because there's a 24-hour period between when BIPs are proposed and when they can be executed, the attacker launched the flash loan, right, where they borrowed the $1 billion, they acquired the supermajority of stock, and they executed BIP 18. But BIP 18, which at the time had referenced or called an Ethereum address that up until that point was inactive, had nothing at that address, the attacker used create2 to deterministically deploy another contract at that address, and that contract facilitated the execution of the actual attack from Beanstalk. So none of the on-chain code that was used to attack Beanstalk was present until the attack itself, other than BIPs 18 and 19, which appeared innocuous, if that makes sense. So it was an incredibly sophisticated attack that Beanstalk was the victim of, and that's in short what happened. And in summary, it was an attack on the governance of the protocol.
Right. Yeah, that was extremely sophisticated. So the attack on Beanstalk exposed how sensitive token-weighted voting really is. So does Beanstalk intend to change its voting structure in the future? How do you intend on avoiding governance exploits and the path forward?
So this is a larger question that the Beanstalk DAO is going to have to consider over a longer period of time. even to Vitalik weighed in on Twitter that token-based governance is unsafe. And in short, there's sort of a short-term solution which Beanstalk Farms has proposed, and then a longer-term governance solution that, in a truly decentralized and censorship fashion, should be created, tested, audited multiple times, and then finally implemented if the DAO votes on it. In the short term, in order to get Beanstalk in a position where it can run again without exposure to similar attacks, on-chain governance has already been removed, and the thought is to have Beanstalk governed by a community-run multi-sig for the foreseeable future until an on-chain governance solution can be implemented, and then there will be off-chain voting by the DAO, if that makes sense.
Yeah, so I'm also familiar with this project called Orange Protocol, and this project creates the possibility of reputation-based voting, which is generated from on-chain data. And I think that verifiable credentials are the way to go for optimal DAO governance. Voting based on reputation would pretty much eliminate the possibility of one person or a group of people manipulating DAO governance due to owning the majority of the project. So verifiable credentials, I believe, is going to be essential in protecting decentralization. So out of this whole situation, the silver lining that I see is that Beanstalk is now battle tested. Most projects will be finished right now. However, the incentive model for Beanstalk to attract creditors is solid, and the community proved that the protocol is worth fighting for. So Beanstalk gained a lot of attention since the exploit, and I saw that Bloomberg reported on the attack as well. But once Beanstalk captures the 76 million in lost liquidity, I think the protocol will reach a new level of respect. Do you think that the attack actually helped Beanstalk in the long run?
Well, that remains to be seen. The glass half full perspective is that there's a lot more publicity. There's a lot more eyes and ears looking at Beanstalk. There's a lot more focus on security. And as you said, Beanstalk is now battle tested and it's down but not out. And if it's able to come back from this, it bodes well for the protocol in the long term. Now, the glass half empty perspective is this fucking sucks. The protocol was stolen from on the order of $77 million. And regardless of how great the protocol is doing and how much of that money it's able to recapitalize via this barn raiser, the glass half empty perspective is, this is horrible. But I tend to agree with you, Jarvis, that in the grand scheme of things, if Beanstalk is able to get back on its feet, and from my perspective, that doesn't mean necessarily even raising, recapitalizing the full 77 million. If it's able to recapitalize even a portion of it, but the model is able to restart in a sustainable fashion, and think that the structure of the barns really does encourage that and make that likely, that Beanstalk has a very bright future ahead of it regardless. And so the barn raise is really a jumpstart in many ways, in our opinion. And we're big fans of the idea that the DAO has and the Beanstalk Farms has ultimately put forward. And we're hopeful that the snapshot vote that is going to be presented to the DAO shortly will go forward to basically greenlight the barn raise. And we think it's a compelling way forward. Our understanding is that Beanstalk Farms also feels like it's compelling, and they're the ones that ultimately presented the idea. So kind of goes without saying. But at the end of the day, this is there's a lot that can be done. I think if Beanstalk can really demonstrate the effectiveness of its credit model here, and not just that, but the demand for its credit, the sky is the limit. So this is an opportunity. This is certainly an opportunity. Whether in the long run Beanstalk is better for it, what the community and what Beanstalk is able to make of this opportunity will be a large determinant.
Yeah, and it's definitely a study case for other DAOs, because what happened to you could have essentially, well, what happened to Beanstalk could essentially happen to many other DAOs, really. So it definitely opened the eyes to governance, especially since this was a governance exploit. So, what other adversities has Beanstalk faced in the past? I know you have depegged a long time ago, and he was able to recover from that. So, like, what adversities caused depegging for being in the past?
So, from our perspective, there's really two different types of adversities. One is the price, and the other is the debt level. So there have been a couple periods in time where the price has been below $1 and sometimes significantly. In September, it was down at 24 cents. And then there have been other periods of time where the price is down at 80 cents or even lower. Now, the price is currently at 0 cents, Jarvis. So that's a different set of circumstances, or an order of magnitude worse set of circumstances. But that doesn't mean that the protocol is dead, particularly because of the second axis over which the protocol optimizes, which is debt level. And the entire history of Beanstalk effectively consisted of the debt level increasing over time, except for the past 2 or 3 weeks prior to the attack, such that Beanstalk is, in a theoretical way at least, in a good position to issue debt, right? So even though the price is down bad right now, the debt level, the pod rate, the health of the system from a debt perspective is in a much better place than it was a couple weeks ago. And that hasn't changed as a result of the attack. So the concept is that Beanstalk does have this lever, the credit, that it can kind of let out. It can issue more debt, increase its debt level, in order to try to bring the price back to $1, if that makes sense. So that's in practice how the credit-based model gives Beanstalk a chance here.
Absolutely. So, yeah, so I understand the barn raise is coming up, and the barn raise is to restore up to 100% of the roughly 76 million of non-being liquidity stolen from the silo through a
76
fundraiser.
and change. It's 76 and change, 76, 77,
Mm-hmm.
76
So
plus,
how?
exactly. Any way
So
you say it, it sounds horrible, Joris.
it's bad either way. But how will the barn raise achieve this? Like, how long? Also, how long will it last?
So here's our understanding of the current barn raise proposal as Beanstalk Farms has proposed it. There's a couple of different stages to the barn raise. From our perspective, it helps to think of it as 3 different stages, the first of which has 2 phases. So maybe 4 stages, but 3.5, however you want to think of it. The first stage with 2 parts is the barn raise itself. The second part of the barn raise is really where the core of the credit model of Beanstalk is able to shine. So normally the credit model, so in total, the barn raise, the first stage, the barn raise is going to last 10 days in total. The first phase of it is 7 days, and the second stage is 3 days, excuse me. And in short, the 3-day period is where the credit model of Beanstalk, the soil model, the weather, the first in, first out mechanism, the whole shebang is going to be on full display. Where even though normally Beanstalk takes a very slow and steady approach to issuing debt and is unconcerned with the time it takes normally to attract lenders, these are somewhat exigent circumstances. And so in order to try to give a jumpstart to the protocol, the question is, how can you, over a very short period of time, model the normal effect of the soil mechanism effectively? And so the concept is to have the weather start at 20% for a new pod line. And this pod line is going to get paid out 1/3 of all new bean mints going forward. So for reference, previously, every time beans are minted, because the price is above $1, half of all new bean mints go to the silo, stockholders in the silo, and half go to the pod line. Under this proposal, 1/3 of all new bean mints will go to the silo, 1/3 will go to the old pod line, and 1/3 will go to this brand new pod line, this barn raised pod line. So the concept is, if you are the first lender in this pod line, this new pod line, you are going to be in the very front, which is unique. The idea is for the weather to increase 1% every 10 minutes for 3 days. So from 20% to 452%, I believe, which in practice simulates Beanstalk trying to price its debt. So that will happen over 3 days, and the concept is that people can get in line at any weather they want from 20 to 452% over those 3 days. Now, the question becomes, under that structure, how does anyone price the debt? What's the right interest rate to ask Beanstalk to pay? And so the idea is for there to be a 7-day bidding process prior to the sowing period itself, the 3-day sowing period, where people can place bids at a given interest rate for an amount. So someone can bid, 1,000 or 100,000 USDC or UST, whatever the currency that is, or currencies that are accepted in the barn raise are or is, and set an interest rate. And the concept is that when the weather starts to go up during the sowing period, if you bid 100%, you will get in line. Your bid will automatically clear when the weather hits 100%, if that makes sense. And in order to incentivize people to bid early, the idea would be to offer some sort of bonus the earlier that you place your bids. So it's a 7-day bidding period. If you bid on the first day, you get like a bonus that decreases the closer to the start of the sowing period itself. So that's the barn raise structure, if that makes sense, Jarvis.
All right, wow. You said the weather increases 1% every 10 minutes, and at a certain point of time. That's definitely
that's gonna be fun to watch. That's for sure.
It's gonna be fun. Yeah, that's every DGen's dream, right there. So, my understanding as well, there will be a new bean token. Is that correct?
So there's really 3 phases to this, and the new bean token is part of the restart, if you will. So after the barn raise is complete, one of the main questions is, how is Beanstalk going to be able to sustain itself if it's only able to raise 10% of the 77 million, 50%, or 80%? Does it have to raise 100%? So one of the key ideas of the proposal, the second step or the second stage in the proposal, is a haircut across the entirety of Beanstalk based on the percentage of the barn raise that is completed. So if the barn raise is able to raise 50% of the funds, the entire state of Beanstalk prior to the attack will be scaled down, according to this proposal, by 50%. So the beans, the stock, the seeds, the BDV that are in deposits, the pods, the entire system will get haircut such that the state of the system and the health of the system is preserved, if that makes sense. So, for example, the pod rate will not change. Beanstalk will not have an increase in the pod rate as a result of the haircut, other than obviously the new pods being issued from the barn raise. But the concept of the haircut is the current state of Beanstalk will be scaled to whatever amount of funds Beanstalk is able to recapitalize. Now, the third stage is the restart itself. And the restart itself has a couple of details to it that are designed to set Beanstalk up for long-term success. So let's take the best case scenario where the fundraise, the barn raise, is able to accumulate the full 76 and change million dollars of value. If silo members, the people that had their value deposited in the silo that were stolen from, they're getting effectively all of their value back. And so they have a natural incentive to want to get the fuck out, like this is incredible. Can't believe that all the money was taken and now it's back. I'm cashing out, And so the question is how to make sure that the people that are lending to the barn raiser or lending as part of the barn raiser don't feel like they're providing exit liquidity to the people that were stolen from. So the third part of the restart, and the state of Beanstalk has to be reset. That includes the issuance of a new Bean token, as you were asking about, Jairus. But the concept is once Beanstalk is restarted, unpaused, whatever you want to call it, there will be a vesting on all of the silo assets that have been replaced. So let's say you had $1,000 of BDV in the silo that has now been replaced, or 1,000 circulating beans that have now been replaced. Whatever that is, there will be a vesting associated with those tokens or those deposited assets, where you can withdraw them or claim them effectively at any time, but the amount of those assets you have to forfeit your right to under this proposal is a function of the percentage of the new pod line, the barn raised pod line that has been harvested, which creates a really nice dynamic incentive alignment, in our opinion, because if the silo members that are getting their funds recapitalized wait until all of the lenders that lend and recapitalize the system are paid back, they don't have to forfeit $1. Whereas if they take out money when only 50% has been paid back, they forfeit 50%, their rights to 50% of the assets. And that also creates a very nice incentive alignment between the people that are all staying in the silo, because then those unclaimed assets that the people that are claiming forfeit effectively are just distributed to the other people that are waiting, if that makes sense. So there is some additional incentive to the people that are getting recapitalized to remain long-term supporters of the system. So I think this is a very elegant proposal by Beanstalk Farms in summary, and it's been incredible to watch all of the community provide feedback and everyone synthesize like this optimal, or getting close to an optimal solution, if that makes sense.
So while Beanstalk is regaining its liquidity, this allows everybody that lost money in the silo to essentially get their money back. Does this account for people that lost
some percent?
So does that account for people that had pods as well?
So in theory, the pods are debt, right? So the debt is really represented in a couple different ways. The number of pods that you have placed in line, and in theory, the distribution of new bean mints. And so the concept here is the haircut will affect both the number of pods and the place in line. If your plot starts at X in line and is Y long, there's only 50% of the funds in the barn raise are raised. You will now have X over 2 and Y over 2. Like the whole plot will get halved in practice, the place in line and the amount, which is interesting. Now, you are getting diluted if you're a pod holder under this proposal, because even though the whole system is getting scaled back such that if the minting schedule wasn't changed and the old pod still received 50% of new bean mints, then the percentage of the bean supply that your plot will harvest for will not be diluted. However, the third axis is what is the distribution of bean mints. And under the proposal going forward, until the new barn raised pod line is fully harvested, half of all new bean mints, a third of all new bean mints will go to the new pod line, a third will still go to the old pod line, and a third will go to stockholders. And therefore, there is some dilution in terms of the calculus on when your plot harvests your percentage of the bean supply. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense. My next question though was gonna be, what assets are you gonna be able to be sown that users will be able to sow? Can you still sow ETH? Well, not sow ETH, but deposit ETH and Bean into the silo.
So, well, there is two questions, right? One is on the sewing functionality, and the
Mm.
second is on the depositing, the assets that will be depositable in the silo. Uh, the sew functionality should still be supported from some base asset. Now, it's really dependent on what are the liquidity pools that Bean supports from the start. And for simplicity, it's likely to be only one liquidity pool. Maybe there will be a second, but the concept is that there still should be the same uh, nice user experience where you can go from Ethereum or from
Yeah.
whatever the other asset Bean is trading against into LP tokens that are deposited,
Mm.
or into the field. And so it's just unclear what asset that will be, and the DAO will have to figure that out. And that's also something that could be negotiated, if that makes sense. That the DAO does have some negotiating power, because whatever assets Bean starts trading against, there's likely to be a lot of demand for those assets from Beanstalk, if that makes sense. So I think that there's no reason to commit to what those assets will be just yet. And it'll be interesting to see what the DAO ultimately decides to use.
Okay, interesting. Looking forward to that. Um, let's see here. So now that you decided to dox yourself after the event, so I understand that it's three of you behind the pseudonym of Publius, just like the original Publius who wrote the Federalist Papers, Alexander Hamilton, John Jay, and James Madison. So how did you all meet? How did you arrive at reanimating the character of Publius?
So we met in college at the University of Chicago, and that's where we became friends.
Mhm.
We None of us were in college at the time that we started Beanstalk. Brendan and Michael both had graduated uh, a year or two prior, and I think a year and a half prior at that point, and I never graduated from college. So, in short, how did we get started working on Beanstalk? Uh, Brendan and I happened to be hanging out around Thanksgiving of 2020, because I was out in Los Angeles around then. It was COVID times, and I was just kind of floating around the country. And Brendan is from Los Angeles, so he was home for the holidays, and we were catching up. And ESD was blowing up at the time, and we had this prior conviction that non-collateralized stablecoins were going to be a major game changer for DeFi. And so that evening, we read the ESD white paper together. We found it very compelling and inspiring, but also we thought there were some very obvious inefficiencies in the model. And we thought that we would work on an ESD fork effectively. So we started working we thought it would be 2 or 3 months, and very quickly realized it was, you know, not going to be that. Michael is Brendan's roommate, and he heard us talking about it nonstop, and he was like, I got to get in on this. So we quickly roped him on board. And then for basically the next 9 months, the three of us started working on Beanstalk. And we didn't know it was going to take 9 months. We kept thinking it was almost done, almost done, almost done. But, things take time. And in short, in early August 6th, we finally uh, deployed Beanstalk on the Ethereum mainnet. So that's kind of the short version of how we got here, if you will.
Okay, so did you always have the name Beanstalk in mind, or were there any other names floating around?
I can't hear you, Jarvis.
No, yeah, I can't hear you. Yeah, I can't hear you either. I can hear you now. Let me rephrase that question. So,
Now,
did you have any
Beanstalk
other?
was. If I hold on, let me pull it up. Can try to verify. Can you hear me?
I can hear you
Can you hear me,
good now.
Jarvis?
Yeah, I can hear you good. Yeah, now. So, yeah, the question I asked before you started to cut out was, did you have any other names for Beanstalk Farms? Was there any other names flown around in the early stages?
So, uh, it's funny. I'm trying to look through some of our old notes to see if there was any other working names. I think there's like so it was originally going to be an ESD fork, and I think we started calling it BSD, uh, BSD because of Brendan and Ben, and that obviously didn't stick. But as we started to write the white paper, we needed some name to fill in effectively, and it started with I think the Beanstalk protocol, and at some point it just got shortened to Beanstalk. But at the moment that the name Beanstalk kind of struck, it was funny because I remember thinking I'm gonna have to explain this a bunch why we chose Beanstalk, and I have no good answer. But we started using it as a working title, and as the metaphor started getting built out more and more, it made a lot of sense. So that it just kind of was serendipitous.
Yeah, I wonder whose idea was it to have all of these metaphors. That's what really got me interested in Beanstalk. I really made because it's such a complex project, but to me the metaphors it simplifies it. It gives it a way that it gives it color. You know, like it gives meaning to everything that's
We
going on in
appreciate
the protocol.
that. We
Mhm.
appreciate that. We all spent a lot of time on that metaphor, so it's yeah, that's very nice to hear.
Yeah, it definitely makes it interesting. So yeah, was that your idea to be so metaphorical?
So hard to give uh, individual credit. It was like the amount of time we spent on the phone together talking. It's we'd be like go into
Mhm.
our little caves, come back. We got it was just a total collective brainstorm. So hard to take credit.
Yeah, it seemed like it was a lot of fun though coming up with this.
We put our whole heart and soul into this thing. So it was a
Mhm.
total blast, and we're still optimistic, and we're still ready to put our heart and soul into this thing. And we feel like Beanstalk
Absolutely.
has such a bright future in front of it. And at this point, it's attracted like like almost 50 contributors to the protocol. So
Mhm.
and as we started with when we were really down in the dumps on Sunday, it was the other contributors that really demonstrated their love for the protocol and made it seem like there was something worth fighting for. So yeah, a lot to be said there.
Right, right. Yeah. Once again, big shout out to the Beanstalk community for really holding it down. So I'm curious to know, when did your crypto journey begin in general? Like what led you down this rabbit hole?
So I think we all have our own individual journeys. Not sure if you know Publius wants to come up here and chat about it at all either. But the I'll just speak on my own behalf. Um, the so back in 2017, after I'd completed my freshman year at the University of Chicago, where I was studying computer science, I got an internship trading global macro or trading FX at a family office or a hedge fund in Manhattan. And
Mhm.
in short, uh, my first day on the job for my internship happened to be the same first day as their newly hired crypto portfolio manager. And so he and I had the two crappiest desks in the office right across from one another. And they, we hit it off. And about 2 weeks later, they said to me, we're going to pull you off of FX and have you come work on crypto for the rest of the summer. And one of my truly favorite stories to tell, Jarvis, is that night I got dinner with a very close friend of mine, and I was fucking livid. I'm like, ugh, I have my dream internship. Like, this is like, FX and stuff had been what I was interested in beforehand and had an internship before college. I have my dream internship. And now I'm getting pulled over to go work on fake internet money. Like, ugh, I can't believe this is happening. And within 48 hours, I knew my whole life had been changed, basically. Like, holy shit. And fast forward to towards the end of my internship, and at some point, my boss turns to me and says, what do we have to pay you to drop out of college? And I'm 19. Like, what in God's name do you make of something like that, right? So the other relevant part here is that this family office was the family office of Mike Novogratz. And it was in the process, just as the summer was kind of winding down, of going from a family office to what is now Galaxy Digital Investment Group, which is, needless to say, one of the biggest companies in crypto. And so in practice, they were asking me to stay on board and work there, right? Which was an incredible offer. And I was, I spoke about it with my family and with the big boss and with my boss, and was like 98, 99% ready to take the job. And one of my closest friends from college, who's a total math whiz, was out in the New York area for the US Open, and we hung out a bunch. And when he left, I kind of realized, like, I'm not ready to go live in New York alone, like, and work a real job. Like, I want to go back to college, But I knew that crypto was not just the future, but I basically couldn't do anything but crypto. And so the question was, how can I both go back to school and do some sort of work, similar to what I was doing over the summer, but, for myself. And so thus was born Southside Digital Capital, which Brendan did a little bit of help with me on. We tried to build an Ethereum node at one point. My buddy who came out to the US Open, he ended up being my business partner. But Southside Digital Capital was a crypto investment company, and that was, quite the learning experience. It did well for a time and then not very well, and got kind of like a tutelage and risk management, if you will, in many ways. And ultimately ended up having to shut down the business because it was not doing very well. And it was like a very humbling 2 or 3 year experience and set of lessons, and went back to college because the business failed. I dropped out of college to work on it full time at some point. And I went back to college and was back at college for like 6 months, and then COVID hit. And so wasn't down to do the COVID classes and all that bullshit. And so basically, and that was why I ended up in Los Angeles. I was just kind of floating around. I was just reading as many books as I could and exercising and stuff like that. So in short, sorry about the noise. In short, basically got, was doing lots of independent study and trying to acquire all of the skills that I wish I had while I was running Southside. And, then Brendan and I, and then Mikey started working on Beanstalk together, and that kind of became the all-intensive process. So that's the long and the short of it, Jarvis. But that's how I got here. Brendan and Mikey each have their kind of own independent journeys through crypto and life, but that's how I got here, at least.
Yeah, well, that's an amazing story. I'm glad that you shared that with us today. So, you said that initially you was upset when you had to handle the crypto side of your job, but you said it only took, you said about 48 hours for you to understand that crypto was the future. What was it that gave you that moment? Like, what gave you what was it that you saw that allowed the light bulb to really go off? Was it Ethereum or like what asset in general, or was it just understanding what blockchain technology was all about?
Well, I read the Bitcoin white paper. I set up a Bitcoin wallet, I set up an Ethereum wallet, and the whole concept of autonomous technology or autonomous software that is run based on incentives and run based on economic alignment.
Game theory.
It was just a total mind fuck, like it opened up a wide variety of different new axes of thought, which had previously been totally I was unaware of, basically. So it was just an amazing, and that was just the beginning. It's not like I learned everything there was to learn in the 48
Yeah.
hours, but
I feel you.
it's just that's how much time it took me to realize this is a game-changing piece of technology or technology paradigm, and that this was going to be basically what I work on for probably the rest of my life, or certainly the foreseeable future.
I feel you. Yeah, I had that same experience when I came across a YouTube video of Bankless. The very first time I saw Bankless and heard David Hoffman and Ryan Sean Adams speak. When the first time I heard them speak to Mark Cuban about NFTs, and that was the first time I heard about an NFT was through Bankless, and that just really just changed my mind. I really wanted to be a part of this industry, and I wanted to learn the lingo and be able to know what's really going on to the extent of David Hoffman and Ryan Sean Adams, and now I'm here. And then the Bankless DAO is just amazing what this system allows, through decentralization. So also want to say that a lot of people that I speak to regarding Beanstalk has much more faith in the protocol now that you are doxxed. And I recognize that you are the voice, that you're the voice behind Publius, but will the other two be more vocal going forward?
So, in general, there's a couple things to say. We've always tried really hard to not be the leaders as much as people do ask us lots of questions, and we have lots of opinions and thoughts because of how much thought we put into the model. But at the same time, just because of the three of us, division of labor, talking is one of the places I tend to excel compared to the other two, per se. And furthermore, they don't love to talk, per se. And not that I love talking, but this isn't nearly as painful for me as it would be for the other two, if you know what I'm saying, Chara. So just kind of a division of labor thing. I end up doing a lot of the talking. Now, historically, they have participated, Brendan in particular, answering a lot of technical questions. But in general, unless it's particularly technical, where it's something that I'm unable to give the complete picture of in a succinct fashion, normally we don't necessarily feel like it's necessary for all of us to be talking. And there is something to be said for the decentralization of Publius, right? Like, it's nice that there's not one Publius, right? So we don't all agree on everything, and we have constant internal discussion. And one of the things that I think contributors to Beanstalk have seen a lot is that we don't agree, and there's constant internal discussion. And so one of the things that will likely change is that may be slightly more public, if that makes sense, if there end up being longer term academic or intellectual disagreements, if you will, that are all healthy in our opinion. But the concept is there's something really nice about there, even though I do a lot of the talking. There really is no individual with a say. Even if all of Publius agrees, that's not really ultimately what matters. It's what the DAO wants, and we just view ourselves as complementary to and a part of the DAO. And yeah, it's funny, right? All this talking, it feels like we're repeating ourselves a lot, but it also feels like there's a lot of benefit to getting out in front of new audiences and having a similar but slightly different conversation where the goal is to communicate as much information as possible. That's a pleasure. So for us, it's unfortunate that it's under these circumstances, but in general, what more could we ask for than to have the opportunity than to talk about Beanstalk all day, right? Like, this is something we put our heart and soul into, and the fact that people want to listen is incredible.
Yeah, it's incredible, and a lot of people believe in Beanstalk and wants to.
Can you guys hear me?
What's up, Cable?
Hey, what a pleasure. This has been an absolute delight to hear you. I've been a big fan of Beanstalk for a little while now. I got introduced to it by Path. I know that he works with you guys closely, and oh man, he is the man. And I literally this entire story is unbelievable. What you guys have been doing lately, it's one for the ages. So like, huge kudos to you for managing to get this huge community.
Not done, sir. The story is not written.
No, exactly. It's not written yet, but I'm telling you. Okay. My question is this. I've got a good question for you. So I love the model. I've delved into it in depth. The one concern that I have is what happens when the US dollar, which is inflating at double digits at the moment, becomes the incorrect thing for us to be pegging Bean to. What are we going to start pegging Bean to?
Well, two things. There's a couple of things to say here. One, that's a good problem for Beanstalk to have. Two, in short, the general devaluation of the US dollar, particularly compared to Ethereum, for example, or other assets that Bean trades against, is long-term good for Beanstalk. Like, the value of its obligations compared to the other value that exists there, if the obligations are denominated in USD pegged beans, that's actually healthy for the system. However, from a utility perspective, agree that there may be a desire for other stable coins in addition to a USD bean and a BTC bean, or what I'm saying, like goods or something like that, a token that is pegged to the value of a basket of goods. And based on the current structure of the Oracle, in practice, that just
cut off now.
Can you hear me?
Hello? I can hear you.
Cool. Sorry, I didn't know if I got cut off. Currently, the Oracle.
I can't hear Publius right now.
The Oracle uses the USD ETH pool, where in practice that substitutes as a good value for the US dollar on chain. So Beanstalk could use an ETH WBTC pool to issue a BTC bean.
Yeah, Publius, I can't hear you.
I think other people can hear me though, Jarvis, just for reference. Although I guess he can't hear me saying that, so that's not helpful.
Yeah, unfortunately, that's not helpful right now.
Jarvis, we can hear Publius, so kindly check your mic.
That's
you can't hear me
stuff.
either?
I can hear all of you guys.
Okay.
We can hear you, but you can't hear Publius. But we can hear you.
Got it.
Discord's running out of gas.
So you may need to leave the stage and come back up. That'll usually solve it.
I see you muted.
So for those who aren't particularly familiar with this whole scenario, it's just we've never, as far as I'm aware, in the history of crypto, ever seen a case like this where a protocol has not only got $0, but it's effectively got negative 76 million because it actually has to pay these people back if it's going to start again. It's a really fascinating experiment, and I can't be
I would
more
argue
excited.
it doesn't have any fixed liabilities up to 76, 77 million because of the haircut, right? Where if only 10% of the funds are raised.
But that's such a unique situation. The fact that you have thought about this clever mechanism to actually incentivize all different parties. It's fabulous.
The coolest part, this is already a part of Beanstalk. Fundraisers are already a
I couldn't agree more.
part of Beanstalk. This is like just a slightly unique fundraiser. It's literally in the white paper. How cool is that? The protocol has stuff.
It's so novel.
Acquire capital
Absolutely.
in mass like this.
Yeah,
and
we
now get to test. We get to test if it works. It's going to be cool.
Yeah, on a grand scale.
Appreciate that. And just want to say, it feels like, well, a lot of the core ideas came from us. At this point, it's such a collective effort. The barn raise is the best example. The vast majority of the structure of the barn, one of those things where there's just this incredible brain trust around Beanstalk, and it's very cool. Hopefully, there's an increase in the security brain trust around Beanstalk as a result of this attack, but the economic brain trust is very strong. So
I find
has a bright future ahead of it.
I find it very difficult to believe that the security, entire ecosystem within crypto hasn't just gone and delved into what you've just built. As if they hadn't heard of you until this hack. So I think that I actually think that this entire PR exercise effectively, for you guys, to your point, you get to talk about it every day. Everybody's looking at it. It's amazing. Actually, this will be looked back on for a huge reason, just to garner attention. That's what this thing has managed to do, which has been fantastic. And effectively attention is the scarce resource, right? You're fighting against all of the NFT projects and everything, right? That's what's going on here.
Couldn't agree more. This is the epitome of no publicity is bad publicity. It's like if there was ever evidence of that, So it's appreciate your positive attitude, Cable, and welcome to the Bean community.
Oh man, it's an absolute pleasure. Let me just be very frank. I put a decent stack into the silo, and I was I did the homework, and I was this is a fantastic mechanism. I feel comfortable doing so. And, it was my first rug in crypto. I've been in crypto since 2013. So it stung, right? That said, I'm over it now. And the fact that there is even any whisker of a chance of me getting it back is the most fucking exciting thing I've ever. So I think that this incentive mechanism, if it works, is going to create the most rabid group of community builders. People like me, who I literally thought I'd lost everything and then I got it back. It's amazing. So I'm, huge kudos to what you're building, and I can't wait to be on the journey with you guys.
It takes a village, sir. So it's we feel equally excited to be a part of this, and it's to us it's equally incredible that it's not just maybe there's a chance here. It's wow, there's a real path forward for Beanstalk at this point in time. And I would make the argument, whether the barn raiser raises 10% or 50%, if your time horizon is long enough, at some point, you will make the money back via Beanstalk seniorage, because again, the system has always been designed to be as fair as humanly possible, or as autonomous.
This is possible. It's funny. I try to explain your project to people, and I go, look, in crypto, it's all about asymmetric upside, right? You're looking for the one in, the TAM on what you're building, it doesn't get bigger. Money is the bubble that never pops. That's Naval's quote, and I love it. And it's true. It's that's what we're competing for here. So, kudos to you. I love the terminology and everything, even though it took me an entire weekend to wrap my head around the whole protocol. It's fucking complicated, but thank you for what you've built. So, kudos, and I wish you guys all the best.
Thank you for sharing that, Cable. Thank you for coming up here and speaking. I feel you. Yeah, it took a few days for the all of the metaphors to really like stick, but once it does, you know that you're onto something special with Beanstalk. So I see we are a little past time here. If anybody has any questions, feel free to come up to the stage. Put you up.
In case we get no one up the stage, I would have two questions, and I kind of missed the opportunity to ask while we talked about the bound race. But the first one is about the bound race protocol, and so you mentioned that. Let's formulate it like this. So, what is the minimum amount of capital to be raised in the bound race up in May to unpause the protocol?
So, given this a lot of thought, and let's say the barn raiser raises $0, then Beanstalk is restarted. In practice, that is the same as Beanstalk just being restarted from scratch. So, from our perspective, the two options at this point are either to have some sort of barn raiser or something to get the protocol up and running, or restart it from scratch. And so the concept of, well, if the barn raiser fails, what else is going to happen? Well, you restart it from scratch. So from our perspective, it's kind of tautological. The barn raiser is the barn raiser, and Beanstalk will continue regardless. And one of the nice things about the structure of the barn raiser is Beanstalk scales down to even 0% based on the amount of funds that the barn raiser is able to raise. So I think it's a very elegant way to have the market decide the scale of Beanstalk at this point in time. And yeah, there's no minimum, in short, because of that from our perspective.
That's awesome. Okay, thanks for explaining that. And the second and final question for me here would be, you mentioned in your in the path forward article that you will be partnering with Trail of Bits and Immunify for security measures. Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on that here for the audience as well?
Definitely. And Beanstalk Farms and the DAO as a whole have really used this as an opportunity to emphasize security as much as possible. So in addition to Trail of Bits, which will start an audit in the beginning of June, Halborn is also now going to start an audit on Beanstalk in a week and a half or 2 weeks. Yeah, 2 weeks. And that's in addition to a bounty program through Immunify. So the concept is to use a variety of different vectors to try to, or attack vectors against potential threats, like really high quality audit firms and decentralized bounty programs. So I think that going forward, this is going to be an incredibly high priority for everyone who has anything to do with Beanstalk, and with good reason. And in the long run, think that Beanstalk will be better for it.
Nice. All right. Thank you. So no questions from me here. Jairus, if Anthony hasn't anything to add on this, I think we can wrap this up and be mindful of everybody's time here.
Yep, I'm checking CC chatter, see if we have any questions. See, Jarlaxo, I hope I said that correctly. Jarlaxo said it'll be a huge underdog comeback story. Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, I was just gonna say I appreciate you coming out here and explaining everything to us. And I don't have any specific questions. I think it was covered pretty well.
Thank you very much. Well, appreciate you guys having us. There's still, I think the barn raise is scheduled to start. The 7-day bidding period is supposed to start May 2nd. And then the sowing period is supposed to start May 9th. So there's some time for everyone to kind of get their bearings together and, figure out exactly what's going on. And we really appreciate the opportunity to come here and talk to you guys about what's going on, because the more people that are aware, think the better for Beanstalk. So really appreciate you guys allowing us this opportunity.
And most definitely thank you for coming up here and sharing your story. That was awesome. And I see my friend Drost. He wrote, "Thank you, Publius, and appreciate the transparency." Yeah, thank you for
I'll
coming up
plus
here, being
one that.
transparent with us, and yeah, sharing your story. It was awesome. It was really amazing to hear. It's always great speaking to you, Publius, and I'm looking forward to the barn raise and everything that Beanstalk has in plan for the future.
Thank you very much, Jarvis. I appreciate it tremendously. We appreciate it tremendously.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great weekend.